Greetings folks and welcome to another 8/16/32-bit. I'm Rob and today we're going to be taking a look at a failed video games console, and that console is the C64GS or C64 game system from Commodore. Now the C64GS was an attempt by Commodore to cash in on the ever-growing console market that was becoming much more prevalent in the UK and Europe at the time, with machines like the Sega Master System and the Nintendo NES really starting to sell. But like most decisions made by Commodore around this period, it was a deeply flawed idea and executed incredibly badly. So let's get a few little facts and figures out of the way, shall we? The C64GS was released by Commodore in December of 1990 at a price of £99.99. Now, this sounds great value, but, well, you could pick up a Master System for a roughly similar amount. Also, at about the same time, 8-bit home computer competitor Amstrad released the consoleized version of their CPC range, or rather their new CPC Plus range of systems, the GX4000, again at a similar price point. Both the C64GS and the GX4000 failed. It's believed that in its entire lifespan, the C64GS sold under 20,000 units across the whole of Europe. Now, this wasn't as massive a disaster as it could have been for Commodore, given that the motherboard used was basically just a C64 motherboard, so a lot of those unsold units could be stripped out and the motherboards could be placed into the case of a C64 and then sold on, thus meaning the only real waste was the plastic shells. But anyway, back to the C64GS. When it was released, there was a promise from Commodore that there was going to be over 100 games released for the system by the end of the year. That didn't happen. It's believed that there were a total of approximately 28 games released for the system. Now, given that this was a C64, albeit without the keyboard on it, it was technically possible to hook up a Commodore dataset or a C64 floppy disk drive and access the games from those. Except you didn't have a keyboard, so whilst it was technically compatible, it was functionally useless in this regard. Now, for those that did have a C64GS and were buying the cartridge games, you did get a new 2-button joystick, which was actually required for some of the games. This was the Annihilator. Sounds awesome. It wasn't. It was junk. Really, really junk. I'm talking like Sinclair SJS1 levels of junk. It was prone to breaking and incredibly hard to get a replacement for, well, I was going to say for no apparent reason, but the obvious reason was nobody bought the C64GS in the first place, hence nobody sold spare controllers for it. Now, with the games, it's quite obvious that a system like this was going to struggle without having a lot of software released. And, I mean, there was an attempt. Commodore really got Ocean on side, and Ocean released quite a few games onto cartridge, such as the immensely popular and well-received Batman the movie game, cartridge versions of RoboCop 2 and RoboCop 3, Navy SEALs, Pang, Toki, and cartridges of Shadow of the Beast and a special remade edition of Double Dragon. Of course, with the system not selling in huge amounts, none of these were huge sellers, even though you could use the cartridges on a regular C64 through the cartridge port on the back. Apart from the Batman cartridge, which for some reason didn't quite fit and required holes drilling in it to make it fit. bit of an error there. Another reasonably good supporter of the system was System 3, who released versions of Myth and Last Ninja Remix for the system, both of which required the 2-button controller. So even though you could use them on a regular C64, you couldn't actually play them because you required a joystick with 2 independent button inputs, which were almost impossible to get for the C64. And even though the pinouts were compatible, you couldn't just take, say, a Master System joypad and plug it in, because the second button wouldn't be read independently. Now, like I said, the C64GS was a massive, massive failure. And the reasons for this are pretty obvious when you break it down. Whilst it sounded like a good idea, a £99 console with a familiar brand name of the Commodore 64, by December 1990, the hardware inside the C64GS was 8 years old. It was creaking. Even the best looking C64 games, when you put them up against a Master System title or a NES title, or one of the really newfangled, fancy, imported from Japan Sega Mega Drive titles, they just looked old-fashioned. Hell, even next to the GX4000, the C64GS games looked old hat. It wasn't powerful enough. Certainly not for something that was being sold at the price point it was being sold at. Maybe if it was being sold at £40, £50 like the Atari 2600 Junior was being sold at the time, it might have had a bit more success. But going up against the Master System and the NES at a similar price point, it was always a hiding to nothing. Plus, even just the Amstrad GX4000 coming out at the same time probably cannibalized some potential sales from the C64GS, because if you saw both of them next to each other in a shop, you looked at the boxes, not only did the console from Amstrad itself physically look better, because the GX4000 is a really nice looking machine, but the games looked so much better. Commodore just really made an error here, and it was really a period of major errors for Commodore, not just with the C64 line, but with the Amiga line as well. But that's a whole different story. Now, these don't appear on the market very often, obviously, because there were so few of them. But if one were to appear on the market, would I recommend that you go and buy one? No, I would not. You might as well just buy a regular old C64. Or a C64 Mini if you really must give money to those people. Or even just use an emulator, because frankly, you'll have a much better time. You can play more games, you'll be able to do save states, you won't have to worry about janky third-party 2-button joysticks that don't work properly half the time. And yes, you will have access to the full C64 library, in which there are some absolutely outstanding titles. Now, did you have a C64GS? Did you know someone who had a C64GS? If you did, feel free to leave a comment down below. Let me know your thoughts on this machine. Also, if you've enjoyed this video, please do hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, ring the bell, and do hit the hype button. Whilst the hype button doesn't help as much as it did 2 or 3 months ago, it does still help with the channel's exposure. Now, you can donate to the channel as well. You'll see links down below in the description for my Ko-fi page if you just want to make a one-off donation, or my Patreon or YouTube memberships. You can see the current channel members on screen now. Much love to you guys. You help make all this worth it. And yeah, that is my brief overview of the C64GS. An epic failure in a history of epic failures from Commodore. I've been Rob. This has been 81632-bit, and I'll see you on the next video. Bye for now.